There is a moment in every relationship that is far more dangerous than anger, more final than tears, more decisive than arguments. It is the moment when a woman stops reacting. No raised voice, no long explanations, no desperate attempts to be understood. From the outside, it looks like calm, but psychologically, it is withdrawal, and emotionally, it is already an ending. Because when a woman stops reacting, she hasn't become cold, she has become clear, and clarity rarely arrives without a long history of being unheard. Reaction is often misunderstood. It is framed as weakness, as instability, as a lack of control. But psychologically, reaction is one of the clearest signs of hope a human being can offer. A woman reacts not because she's incapable of restraint, but because something inside her still believes that connection is possible. Reaction is energy, and energy is never wasted on what the soul has already abandoned. When a woman raises her voice, repeats herself, or expresses frustration, she is not trying to dominate the situation. She is trying to be seen. The psyche does not invest emotion where it sees no future. Reaction is the language of a person who still imagines repair. It is the unconscious saying, "This matters enough to disturb my inner balance." Indifference, not reaction, is what follows the death of hope. Consider how often a woman explains the same feeling in different words. She softens her tone, she changes her approach, she questions herself. Each attempt is an act of faith. Faith that if she finds the right words, the right timing, the right emotional posture, something will finally land. This is not irrational behavior. It is deeply human. The mind searches for connection the way the body searches for air. In relationships, reaction is often mislabeled as drama, but what is called drama is frequently grief that has not yet accepted itself as grief. Anger, disappointment, tears, these are transitional emotions. They exist between attachment and detachment. They are the psyche's way of negotiating loss before it becomes final. When a woman reacts, she is still negotiating. She has not yet closed the inner door. There is a subtle but crucial distinction between reacting and overreacting. Overreaction is disproportionate emotion without context. But most reactions in long-term relationships are cumulative. They carry the weight of repetition, dismissal, and unmet needs. What appears excessive in the moment is often the echo of many moments that were never addressed. The psyche does not reset after being ignored, it stores. Reaction is also an act of vulnerability. To react is to expose one's emotional center to the risk of rejection. Every time a woman expresses disappointment, she is revealing what she hoped for. Every complaint reveals a value. Every tear reveals an attachment. Weakness avoids exposure. Reaction embraces it. Psychological research on attachment consistently shows that people protest when bonds feel threatened. This protest is not manipulation, it is biological and emotional signaling. The nervous system responds to perceived distance with activation. A woman reacts because her bond matters. Her system is saying something important is at risk. And yet, reaction is often punished. It is met with defensiveness, minimization, or silence. Over time, the psyche learns. Not all learning is conscious. The unconscious begins to associate expression with pain. Slowly, reaction loses its meaning. Hope erodes not because it was false, but because it was unreciprocated. This is why reaction fades before love does. Love can survive many wounds. Hope cannot. Hope requires feedback. It requires some evidence that expression leads somewhere. When that evidence disappears, reaction becomes exhausting. The psyche conserves itself. It is important to understand that when a woman stops reacting, it is no growth in the way people like to imagine. It is not maturity or emotional mastery. It is often resignation. The energy once directed outward turns inward. She no longer seeks change, she seeks peace. And peace at that stage means distance. Reaction says, "I still believe you can meet me here." Silence says, "I no longer believe." That is why reaction is precious. It is a sign that the relationship is still alive in the inner world. As long as a woman reacts, there is movement. As long as there is movement, there is possibility. Many people regret arguments long after relationships end. What they rarely regret is silence. Silence feels safe in the moment, but it is corrosive over time. It teaches the other person that their inner life is not welcome. Reaction, even when uncomfortable, is an invitation to enter the emotional reality of another human being. If reaction were truly weakness, it would disappear first. But it does not. It persists until it is exhausted. Only when hope has been depleted does calm arrive. And by then the calm is not peaceful, it is empty. To understand reaction as hope is to recognize its value before it vanishes. It is to listen not just to the words but to the need beneath them. Reaction is not asking for perfection, it is asking for presence. And presence, more than anything else, is what keeps love alive. Emotional withdrawal is often mistaken for indifference, but psychologically, it is one of the most sophisticated forms of self-protection the human mind can create. When a woman begins to withdraw emotionally, it is not because she no longer feels, it is because she feels too much for too long without safety. Indifference is empty. Withdrawal is guarded. One comes from absence, the other from overload. The mind does not detach suddenly, it adapts. After repeated experiences of being unheard, misunderstood, or emotionally exposed without response, the psyche learns a quiet lesson. Expression is dangerous here. What once felt natural becomes risky. What once flowed outward begins to fold inward. This is not cruelty, it is survival. A woman does not wake up one day and decide to care less. Care does not obey willpower. What changes is access. She limits access to her inner world because that inner world has been bruised. Emotional withdrawal is the nervous system lowering its volume to avoid further injury. It is not the absence of love, but the containment of it. In the early stages, withdrawal is subtle. She still listens, but she shares less. She responds, but with fewer details. She avoids certain topics not because they no longer matter, but because they cost too much. Each silence has a history behind it. Each restraint is the result of something once expressed and dismissed. This is why emotional withdrawal often confuses those who witness it. From the outside, it looks calm, controlled, even mature, but internally, it is a state of constant monitoring. She is choosing words carefully. She is managing expectations. She is learning how to remain present without being vulnerable. That effort is invisible, but it is exhausting. Psychologically, withdrawal is a boundary created after boundaries were not respected. It is what happens when saying "this hurts" changes nothing. The psyche stops asking and starts protecting, not because it wants distance, but because closeness has become unsafe. Many women describe this phase as feeling like they are shrinking, not disappearing, but compressing. They are still there, but less expressed, less open, less spontaneous. This shrinking is not a lack of depth. It is depth under lock and key. Emotional life continues, but it is no longer shared freely. There is often a critical misunderstanding at this stage. Others assume that because she is no longer reacting, she is no longer invested. In truth, the investment has simply moved inward. She is investing in stability, in self-regulation, in minimizing pain. Withdrawal is not the end of attachment, it is the final attempt to preserve oneself within it. From a psychological perspective, withdrawal is what occurs when the psyche no longer believes repair is possible through communication. Words have failed, emotion has failed, so the system switches strategies. Instead of trying to change the environment, it changes itself. This is adaptation, not apathy. The tragedy of emotional withdrawal is that it often looks like peace to those who caused it. Arguments stop, demands fade, the atmosphere feels lighter. But what has actually happened is that the woman has stopped bringing her inner life into the shared space. The relationship becomes quieter, but also shallower, less tense but less alive. Withdrawal also carries grief. It is not a neutral state. It is filled with unspoken endings, abandoned expectations, and imagined conversations that will never happen. She is mourning the version of the relationship that required mutual emotional presence. That mourning happens silently. It is important to understand that emotional withdrawal is reversible only at its earliest stages. Once it becomes a stable pattern, it signals that the psyche has reorganized itself around distance. Trust, once lost repeatedly, does not simply return because circumstances improve. The nervous system remembers what the mind tries to forget. Withdrawal is not punishment. It is not manipulation. It is not a test. It is what happens when a woman decides, often unconsciously, that her emotional safety matters more than being understood by someone who no longer listens. This decision is not dramatic. It is quiet, but it is profound. To recognize emotional withdrawal as defense rather than indifference is to realize that silence can be a wound, not a weapon. It is the sound of someone choosing survival over exposure. And the most painful truth is this. When emotional withdrawal becomes complete, it does not mean she stopped loving. It means she stopped hoping that love would be safe. The most dangerous phrase in any relationship is not spoken in anger. It is spoken in relief. She seems fine now. Those words often signal not healing, but surrender. They mark the moment when visible distress has disappeared, and with it, the last remaining evidence that something inside her was still fighting to be seen. When a woman appears fine, it often means she has stopped asking the relationship to carry what it could not hold. The calm that follows emotional struggle is rarely peace. More often, it is the quiet that arrives after hope has been laid down. The psyche does not become calm because it has been satisfied, but because it has stopped expecting satisfaction. In the earlier stages, discomfort was expressed openly. There were questions, explanations, reactions. Each one was an attempt to bridge distance. Each one was an invitation for mutual awareness. When those invitations are repeatedly unanswered, the psyche learns a painful lesson: expression leads nowhere. And when expression loses meaning, silence takes its place. She seems fine now. Is dangerous because it mistakes emotional absence for emotional resolution. It assumes that because conflict has ended, connection has deepened. But conflict often ends not because understanding was reached, but because the cost of continuing became too high for one person to bear. What looks like harmony may actually be emotional resignation. The human mind is capable of extraordinary adaptation. When a woman realizes that her inner life disrupts the environment, instead of enriching it, she begins to contain it. She becomes more careful with words. She edits her feelings before they are spoken. She learns which parts of herself are welcome and which create tension. Over time, this filtering becomes automatic. She no longer shares everything she feels, only what feels safe to share. This is why the phrase feels comforting. Fewer arguments, less emotional intensity. A sense of normalcy returns. But what has actually changed is not the relationship, it is her presence within it. She is still there physically, but internally, she has stepped back. She has begun to live parallel to the relationship rather than inside it. Psychologically, this stage is marked by a shift from engagement to observation. She watches more than she participates. She notices patterns without commenting on them. She feels disappointment without expressing it. This inner distancing creates the illusion of stability, while the emotional bond quietly erodes. There is often a delay between emotional withdrawal and physical departure. During this time, everything appears functional. Routines continue. Responsibilities are met. Conversations happen, but they are shallow. The deeper layers have been sealed off. The relationship survives, but it no longer evolves. The danger lies in misreading this stage as success. Many people believe the relationship has improved because the symptoms have disappeared. But symptoms are not the disease. Emotional pain that is no longer expressed does not vanish. It relocates. It turns inward. It becomes acceptance without joy, endurance without intimacy. She seems fine now also ignores the grief that has already occurred. Long before a woman leaves, she mourns privately. She grieves the version of the relationship she hoped for. She releases expectations one by one. By the time she appears calm, she's already adjusted to loss. The calm is not relief. It is adaptation. From the outside, her eventual departure may appear sudden or even cruel, but psychologically, it is the final step in a long internal process. She left emotionally when she stopped needing the relationship to change. The physical leaving is simply the alignment of outer life with an inner reality that has been forming for a long time. This phrase is dangerous because it discourages curiosity. It stops deeper listening. It signals that discomfort has ended and therefore nothing more needs attention. But relationships do not end from too much attention. They end from too little. Awareness of what silence means. To truly understand a woman's calm, one must ask what preceded it. Calm after being heard is peace. Calm after being ignored is withdrawal. The two may look identical, but they carry entirely different futures. The tragedy is not that she seems fine. The tragedy is that she no longer feels safe enough to show when she is not. And when a woman stops showing her inner world, it is not because she has nothing left to share, but because she has learned that sharing changes nothing. A woman rarely leaves all at once. What appears sudden on the outside is usually the final movement of a long inner journey. Long before footsteps fade or doors close, something quieter happens. She leaves emotionally, and by the time the physical departure occurs, the separation has already been lived through in the depths of her inner world. Emotional leaving begins the moment her feelings stop finding a place to land. Each time she speaks and is not met, a small thread sends. Each time her vulnerability is minimized, misunderstood, or ignored, the bond thins. The psyche records these moments not as isolated incidents, but as patterns, and patterns teach the mind what to expect. At first, she stays fully present. She tries different approaches. She adjusts her tone. She questions herself. She believes that if she can just explain more clearly, love will reappear in the space between them. This phase is not weakness. It is loyalty to the idea of connection. She remains emotionally invested because she still imagines a shared future that requires effort from both sides. But over time, effort without response becomes exhausting. The mind cannot remain open indefinitely in an environment that does not respond. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she begins to retreat inward, not to punish, but to protect. Emotional leaving is not a decision made in anger, it is a response to repeated disappointment. She starts to share less. She no longer reaches for reassura, NCE, in the same way. She begins to process her feelings privately instead of bringing them into the relationship. This shift is subtle enough to be missed. Conversations still happen, daily life continues, but the emotional center of gravity has changed. She is no longer leaning into the bond, she is standing beside it. As she withdraws emotionally, she begins to grieve. This grief is silent and internal. She mourns the version of the relationship that existed in her hopes rather than in reality. She imagines conversations that will never take place. She lets go of expectations one by one. This inner mourning is what makes the eventual physical leaving feel calm rather than chaotic. The storm has already passed inside her. Psychologically, this is a process of detachment, not detachment from love, but from illusion. She releases the belief that things will become what they were meant to be. Once that belief fades, the emotional tie loosens. Love may still exist, but it no longer governs her actions. Self-preservation takes its place. During this stage, many women become more self-reliant. They turn inward for validation. They seek stability within themselves rather than from the relationship. This is not empowerment in the romantic sense, it is necessity. When emotional support is unreliable, the psyche compensates by becoming its own source of grounding. To those around her, she may appear calmer, more independent, even stronger. But this strength is often misread. It is not the strength of being fulfilled. It is the strength of having already let go. She no longer argues because she no longer expects understanding. She no longer asks because she no longer believes asking will change anything. By the time she considers leaving physically, the emotional work is done. She has rehearsed the loss internally. She has imagined life beyond the relationship. She has already learned how to survive without emotional reciprocity. The physical leaving is not a leap into the unknown. It is a step into a reality she has already accepted. This is why physical departure often shocks the other person. They remember the recent calm and assume things were improving. But the calm was not a sign of healing. It was a sign of completion. She had finished hoping. She had finished waiting. She had finished trying to be understood. A woman leaves emotionally before she leaves physically because the psyche seeks continuity. It prepares itself before making visible changes. It does not abandon without first adjusting internally. When she finally leaves, she does not do so impulsively. She does so with the quiet certainty of someone who has already said goodbye in her own mind. The painful truth is that by the time her absence is felt externally, she has already made peace with it internally. The relationship ended not when she walked away, but when she stopped imagining a future that included emotional closeness. And once that imagination is gone, nothing physical can bring it back. The real loss is rarely the person who leaves. The deeper loss is far quieter, far more unsettling. It is the moment that was missed, the moment when something fragile was offered and not received. Relationships do not usually collapse from one great failure, but from a series of small, unacknowledged moments that slowly teach the psyche to stop reaching outward. Every meaningful connection is built on moments of exposure. A woman offers a feeling, a fear, a hope, not dramatically, not always clearly, but sincerely. She brings it forward not because she is certain of the response, but because she believes the relationship is a place where truth can land. That offering is the moment, and when it is overlooked, dismissed, or misunderstood, something subtle changes inside her. At first, the change is almost invisible. She tries again. She finds different words. She waits for a better time. She assumes misunderstanding rather than neglect. This is not naivete, it is attachment at work. The mind protects what it values by giving it more chances than it deserves. Each repeated attempt is a quiet act of loyalty to the bond. But moments do not disappear when they are missed. They accumulate. Each one leaves a small mark, a faint hesitation the next time she considers opening her inner world. Over time, the psyche begins to anticipate disappointment, not consciously, but instinctively. The body tightens slightly before speaking. The words become more careful. The emotions are filtered before they are shared. This is where the real loss begins, long before separation. The relationship still exists, but the shared emotional space starts to shrink. What was once spontaneous becomes measured. What was once vulnerable becomes controlled. She is still present but less revealed. And this reduction is not a choice made in anger, it is a response shaped by experience. The missed moment is often small enough to be dismissed. A sigh that was ignored. A question that was brushed aside. A feeling that was minimized. Each one seems insignificant on its own, but psychologically these moments are signals. They teach the mind what kind of environment it is in. They answer a silent question. Is it safe to be fully myself here? When the answer becomes uncertain, the psyche adapts. It does not announce its retreat. It simply stops offering what is no longer welcomed. Love does not vanish at this stage. It changes form. It becomes quieter, less demanding, less expressive. But this change is often mistaken for maturity or calm. In reality, it is the beginning of emotional distance. The tragedy is that the person who misses these moments often believes nothing important has happened. From their perspective, life continues. There was no argument, no dramatic rupture, but from her inner perspective, something essential was lost. A door closed slightly, then a little more, until one day it no longer opens at all. Learned how to live without being fully seen. The real loss is not the woman who leaves. It is the version of the relationship that could have existed if those moments had been honored. It is the future that quietly dissolved each time understanding was possible but absent. That future does not disappear dramatically. It fades, unnoticed, until one day it is no longer imagined at all. To understand this is to recognize that love is sustained not by grand gestures, but by responsiveness, by the ability to notice when something meaningful is being offered and to meet it with presence. Moments are where relationships live. Miss enough of them, and the relationship survives in name only. When a woman finally walks away, she is not taking the loss with her. The loss already happened, in those moments when she reached out and found nothing waiting for her on the other side. What remains is not anger, but a quiet knowing that what was missed can never be recreated in the same way again. If a woman in your life has gone quiet, don't confuse silence with peace. Silence is often the sound of love packing its bags. And the tragedy is not that she stopped reacting. It's that her reactions were never truly heard.